Why do I still recommend people buy Bitcoin, even when James Check, my favorite Bitcoin analyst, is cautious in the near term? Well, let's walk through some scenarios and I'll explain why. First off, Bitcoin has gone from zero 16 years ago to $124,000 in the last 2 weeks. It peaked about 2 weeks ago, something like that, 10 days, 14 days, something like that ago. And then it came back down to $108,000, about 12 or 13% below its all-time high. And I was recommending people buy Bitcoin all the way through from the very first time I bought Bitcoin. The cheapest Bitcoin I ever bought was $6,400. And I've been recommending people buy Bitcoin at every price between $6,400 and $124,000. So first, let's talk about the high end of that range, $124,000. So as you know, I follow James Check and all of his analysis, which most of the stuff in the chart guys are just like completely bogus, and crypto bros, drawing chart lines on charts, it's all, completely garbage. James Check takes a completely different approach, which is he analyzes the price of Bitcoin entirely through the lens of supply and demand. And supply and demand is the right lens to analyze any asset through. Okay, so first of all, at 124,000, based on every past indicator, he would say, I would say, and everybody in the Bitcoin world would say, that was not the 4-year cycle top. It's just, if it is, it's sort of completely unlike anything we've seen before, which is not impossible. It's just very unlikely. So all the way up to $124,000 strikes me as a good time to buy Bitcoin. And because we know the value of all the gold in the world is worth more than $20 trillion, and Bitcoin is only a $2 trillion asset. So even if Bitcoin is only as good as gold, then Bitcoin's got a good 10x up to $1 million per coin. The vast majority of gold's market capitalization, its value, is due to its monetary properties, not its decorative uses in jewelry, not its industrial uses as a conductor of electricity, for example, but due to its monetary uses. Gold's monetary attributes of its divisibility, durability, scarcity, verifiability, fungibility, all that sort of stuff. Now, Bitcoin is better on all of those characteristics than gold, which means I believe Bitcoin's going to be worth more than $1 million a coin. It's not only going to reach parity in market capitalization, meaning all the Bitcoin in the world, I think, will be worth more than all the gold in the world, but I think it'll be significantly higher than that. But how much higher, we don't know. But regardless, there's a very clear path to $1 million per Bitcoin, just with Bitcoin competing with gold as a store of value, sort of digital gold. Because again, for monetary properties, Bitcoin is categorically better in every category. Okay, so there's never a bad time to buy Bitcoin up to $124,000, which is the highest it's ever been. Because again, I think on your way to $1 million, every price on the way to $1 million is cheap compared to $1 million. All right, so right now we've pulled back from $124,000 to $108,000. And James Check, my favorite analyst, is cautious. He's saying, look, we don't know what the future could hold. 50% chances goes lower, 50% chances goes higher. He does not think we go below $80,000, which I know sounds like a ridiculously low number, unless you've been in Bitcoin any period of time, in which case it's a high number because Bitcoin a year ago had never touched $80,000 in its entire history. So only in the last 16 years, the last 1 year, parts of the last 1 year, has Bitcoin been above $80,000, primarily from the end of last year to most of the present. Not all, but most of the present. But anyway, so if you have an asset that might go to $80,000, might go to 90, might go to 100, but is at 108, but it also has a very high likelihood of going to $1 million, then let's play out the scenarios. What if I said it was a bad idea to buy Bitcoin, unless it was 100,000 or 95,000 or 90,000 or 80,000? Well, the problem is you're making a very bad, the odds are not in your favor. I'll put it that way. And here's why. If you're going from 108 down to $80,000, you're trying to save whatever, 25%, whatever that is. The problem is the upside is 1,000%. So your certainty that Bitcoin will visit $80,000 has to be, what would that be? 25 into 1,000 would be 40x. You better be 40 times more certain that it's going to go to 80 than that it's going to go to 1,000. Because otherwise it makes no sense to sacrifice a 1,000% upside chasing a 25% downside. That ratio just makes no sense. And so in the world of Bitcoin, it virtually never makes sense to wait for a lower price. I would say just categorically, it never makes sense to wait for a lower price because you're potentially forfeiting 1,000% upside trying to capture 5%, 10%, 25% downside, which again, that mathematically just doesn't make sense because whatever the upside is, you can divide it by the percentage you're trying to capture on the downside, and you can have a good sense of sort of how likely you are to get left out in the cold. This has happened numerous times. I mean, just in the time I've been in Bitcoin in the last 8 years, there are numerous points where the price goes somewhere and then people are predicting it will go lower and then it never does. So for example, earlier this year, the peak last year after the ETF launch in March of last year was $73,800. So let's assume you picked your number and you said, okay, the highest it ever got after the ETF launch, immediately after the ETF launch, was $73,800. If it ever touches that price again in 2025, I'm buying. Well, guess what? The price dipped down to $74,600, and then it went up to $124,000. So you would have missed by about $800. And are you seriously willing to sacrifice 1,000% upside because you guessed less than 1% off of how low it might go? The biggest place that this was absolutely insane, and I mean insane, was in 2022. The price had gone up and then up in 2021, came back in 2022, and we spent 4 months below $20,000. And in fact, I think we spent quite a few months, weeks at least, below $17,000. And all over Twitter, people were like, only fools are buying Bitcoin for $16,000. I'm waiting for $13,800. For some reason, a ton of people on Twitter, because they had all compared charts and graphs and they were all trying to outguess each other, had been convinced that Bitcoin was going to hit $13,800. And so all of them were bragging about how much dry powder they had and how many US dollars they were sitting on, that they were just waiting to buy this Bitcoin at $13,800. And the lowest Bitcoin ever dipped after the FTX blow up, which had nothing to do with Bitcoin. It just, FTX drug it down because people didn't know the difference. The lowest it ever dipped was 15,500. Now, people like me, I was buying in the 30s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, the teens. I was buying at every price level because I knew that we didn't know where the bottom was. And it was not worth risking a massive mega upside in order to try to capture a few extra percentages on the downside. But there is a huge amount of money, tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars, planning to buy Bitcoin at $13,800, and they will never buy Bitcoin at $13,800. All of those people either paid a much higher price than I paid when I was buying Bitcoin hand over fist below $17,000. They either paid a lot more than that because once the price started running, they probably didn't want to, they waited a long time for that $13,800 and the price was in the 20,000s or 30,000s before it became clear they were never going to get $13,800, and they finally capitulated and bought it at a lot higher price. So that's at least better than just missing out completely. But most people just miss out completely. They're like, if it ever goes down to X, I'll buy more. And then when it goes down to X, they don't buy more because they're freaked out because the price is dropping. And every time the price is dropping, people think it's going to keep dropping, right? When the price is going up, they think it's going to keep going up. When it drops, they think it's going to drop. So even if I knew there was a 99% chance that Bitcoin would touch $80,000, if somebody came to me and said, should I wait? I would say no. First of all, there's a 1% chance it doesn't. But there's a 50 to 80% chance that if I tell them to buy Bitcoin at $80,000, that if it ever gets there on the 1% chance it does, I don't know what the percent is, I'm hypothetically saying 1%, they're not going to buy it. Because everybody who thinks they're going to buy Bitcoin at $80,000 at 108 right now is going to freak out when it actually starts going that way and decide not to buy it because it might go lower. And the same psychology happens in my case. I bought a lot of Bitcoin in 2017 and 2018 around $9,000. And I told myself, if Bitcoin ever goes to half its current price, I'm going to buy a bunch more, which is $4,500. Well, guess what? It went to $4,500. What did I do? I did not buy any Bitcoin at $4,500 because I thought, well, if it's dropped this much, it probably will keep dropping. And yeah, it went into the 4,000s and it touched for a little while there, the high, mid to high 3,000s. And then we're sitting at 108,000. Do I wish I had bought a bunch of Bitcoin at 4,500? Yes. Do I wish, but I didn't, because again, I didn't. I wish at $9,000 somebody had told me to just go ahead and buy more because if they had told me, Joel, wait for 4,500 and go all in, I wouldn't have done it because I already told myself that and I already planned to and I already didn't. So nobody who thinks they're going to do that, almost nobody ever follows through. The price is falling. It's scary when the price is falling. Everybody's worried something's wrong with Bitcoin and they don't buy the Bitcoin. So the best time to buy Bitcoin is whenever you can buy Bitcoin. Whenever you have US dollars that could be converted to Bitcoin, that's a good time to buy Bitcoin. If you try to time the downsides, you generally are going to miss out because either the price will never touch that or it will touch whatever your magic number is and you're going to freak out and not buy it after all. I mean, this is just chronic, classic human behavior, which again, is the reason I recommend buying Bitcoin at all prices. Now, at some point, if James Check says, hey, we're in the $130,000, $140,000, $160,000 per coin, and all of his indicators, which are all based on human behavior, it's based on how much profit humans are in on their Bitcoin and how much profit Bitcoin people are taking on their Bitcoin and how high the value of all the Bitcoin is as compared to the price everyone paid for it. So all of those metrics are based entirely on human behavior. It's based on the likelihood that humans sell something when they're in a certain amount of profit or the likelihood that they capitulate in pain when they're at a certain amount of loss. So all of James Check's research is not based on like Bollinger Bands and, golden ratios and, all this crazy stuff. It's not based on that. It's based on human behavior. If the human behavior he sees by watching the flows in and out of the Bitcoin ETFs and all this sort of stuff indicates that things are getting quite frothy, meaning things are getting a little crazy, yeah, I'll probably recommend that you dollar cost average, which means buy the same, it's just target price recurring buys. Buy the same amount of Bitcoin every week and just leave it on as long as you can. At some point, I will probably recommend you switch and, dollar cost average. And initially I thought, if it gets above 120,000, I'll recommend that. But we got to $120,000 and it felt like there was still a lot of gas in the tank. So I'm like, great. If you can buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. So yeah, James Check, his specialty is to help people not buy the very tip and then have to sit underwater for a year or two or longer. And again, at that point, it's better to just dollar cost average. But to me, at least, and even James Check, I mean, he's never said we're close to the top for this cycle. And anyway, so how low could we go? Nobody knows. Are you going to buy it if it goes lower? Probably not. Is now a good time to buy Bitcoin? Yes, because the only time you can guarantee you're going to buy Bitcoin is if you buy it right now. And if you don't buy it right now, the very high likelihood is it will never hit the price where you think you're going to buy it. And if it does hit the price that you think you're going to buy it, you're not actually going to buy it because the price is going to be down. You're going to be freaking out. It's not going to feel good. The best time to buy Bitcoin is when it feels horrible, when it's radically on sale and everyone's worried. That's when it's the cheapest. And that's when the least number of people are buying it because human psychology says everybody's freaking out. So I think $108,000 is a great time to buy Bitcoin. And again, if you are worried it's going to go down, dollar cost average, set up a recurring buy for the same US dollar amount every week, $100 a week, $10 a week, $1,000 a week, whatever you can afford, and just leave it on autopilot. And then you don't have to care about what the price is because if it's lower, you're buying it cheaper. If it's higher, you feel good about what you already own and you just sort of leave it on autopilot. But now is a great time to buy Bitcoin. It's 13% discounted from the highest it's ever been. Could it go lower? Sure. But I wouldn't bet on that. And I certainly would not give up 1,000% upside trying to get it 5, 10, or 25% cheaper. I'm never going to play that game. And the reason I've ended up with as much Bitcoin as I did is because I don't play those games. And I know that people who try to play those games lose. So that's why I'm still recommending people buy Bitcoin, even though James Check is cautious in the near term, extremely bullish in the long term. And I guess I'm extremely bullish all the time because I think there's not a bad time to buy Bitcoin. And the only time you're actually going to buy Bitcoin is when you'll pull the trigger. And if you'll pull the trigger right now, now's a great time to buy Bitcoin. And when it's when it's $1 million per coin, you will not care if you paid 108 or 112 or 124 or 96 or 89. None of those numbers are going to matter when Bitcoin's $1 million a coin in the long term, and that is all that really matters.